Alex from Charmverse. I'm one of the co-founders of Charmverse. Charmverse is a community management, grants management solution for DAOs and Web3 communities. I think what makes us special, particularly when we started a little bit over 2 years ago, is that we took the approach of really combining collaboration feature with Web3 features. So I hope that move to unlock a set of new use cases, whether the specific for DAOs and on-chain communities. And yeah, I think so far so good. We are being used by Optimism, Mantle, Polygon of the world in managing different parts of their community. And yeah, excited to be here.
So can you just tell us a little bit about you?
We're just hearing from you about TogetherCrew and what brings you to this panel today.
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of TogetherCrew. TogetherCrew is a community analytics or community success tool where we are helping communities understand what is working, what is not working inside with their members based on the humans that are inside the community. So slightly different from Charmverse.
Maybe, well, it's what makes knowledge sharing platforms most effective.
Wow, that's a big topic. I think it partially depends on the groups that's using it, right? So I think like one part of it is making things easy, right? Just simply writing things down. So I think particularly in the world moving from centralized to decentralized or being co-located versus being distributed, there really is this shift of being able to communicate mostly through words, voice, and being in the same room to having to actually write things down, right? And I think like that in itself is a skill set. Tools enable that skill set, makes it easier. So I think like that's one of the first part is just how do you make some of these communication, just encourage the people to be able to write stuff down. And going beyond that though is partially is integration on like what are the different pieces of information that you can pull into that sort of knowledge base or area that so then the user don't have to click on 8 different links or like having to log on to like 6 different systems for it to work. And then there's one part. And then finally, I think a big part of having knowledge management system to work with different size of organization and organizing in different ways, particularly when it comes to DAOs or sub-DAOs. A big part of the thing is access control. How do you enable the right people getting access to information? And this is not a DAO only problem. Like for those of you who have ever worked in corporations, half of the time when someone share a link with you, you don't have an account. You have to like trying to find, and then the only error message that you get is that like contact the admin, and you have no idea who the admin is and who can grant you access. So and that kind of problem gets a lot worse in a decentralized manner, right? So you're constantly sharing try to share information, but either people have too much access for things that they shouldn't have access to, but although oftentimes it's more the opposite of that, people just couldn't get to the doc that you wrote. Or get to that database that you created or the Excel sheet that you have. So I think that managing access, making it easy, sort of the core of making a knowledge management solution work for different size and construction of organization.
Maybe like thank you, Alex, for that, and I agree with you. Adding to that, I would say searchability. Like at the beginning, it doesn't really matter, but the more knowledge you start producing and documenting somewhere, finding the right piece of information becomes crucial. I personally find it frustrating having to knowing the right keywords, but still struggling in finding that piece of information that I was looking for. So searchability, which then also goes into abilities of tagging, or kind of just structuring the information in a way that makes sense, which then I find is often more of a human problem because different people, different structures. So then there's that for me are important aspects of a knowledge management platform.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that real quickly. I think tagging particularly is such a contested area. So if you look at Gmail, for example, right? Or like just email as a whole, I am I'm older than I look. So I remember when like back then, just spending an enormous amount of time filtering, putting emails into folders and tagging them meticulously. And then but then trying to apply that in organization context, right? But then Google comes around and say, you know what, the Google Docs almost has no folders. Gmail, you can sort of do folders or tags, but basically just archive everything and keep all the documents and everything just search. And we just do a better job in search and nothing else. I think today we're still struggling with that or still having that two minds. I do find that again for a productivity nerd myself, I continue to find some way to organize and tag my stuff. But I think it's just very difficult to convince any kind of size of larger groups to follow the same process. And at the end of the day, everything sort of end up being in a giant bucket of old stuff and new stuff together, and search turned out to be a better solution, I think. And when you have just a team that are churning, growing, it just make it very hard to get everybody to follow the process. And for tagging, once you lose 20% of the tag, all of a sudden people stop using it because now you're only getting partial information. You can't trust it anymore.
Yeah, that was actually good point. And yeah, for good tagging, you actually need a good human process that is religiously adopted by everybody in the company or everybody in the team, and everybody who's onboarded can continue working for your team until they adopt the same tagging philosophy or practices. So what's the approach? Yeah.
Hi, Basir, right. Newbie here. I'm not a KM expert, but I had to do a whole lot of work associated with KM, and I have an upcoming project that would require a lot of KM. My experience, LexisNexis has the best indexing because not only the human editors, but also the way in which they are classifying the information. They've been going through the indexing for many, many decades. So that would be extremely helpful resource to look at. And as far as Google goes, I have extreme doubts about Google because 20 years ago, 21 years ago, when I was interning at a psych research center, I had colossal amount of documentation and everything. And once I've had the Google toolbar, it could index it and with all the colors, everything. So it seems very pleasant and convenient. But of course, later on, you realize what a danger it poses because you're practically allowing your C drive to be scanned by Google. So privacy is an important aspect too. Thank you.
Thanks, Basir. I wanted to double down on with something that you said earlier, which is the writing things down. Like that's maybe easier said than done. What would you say are what should you keep in mind when you're writing things down for your knowledge management for your team versus for yourself?
Obviously, believe it or not, I would just actually go whatever topic I'm researching, I would go to LexisNexis, and it allows you to see the exact descriptors they are using. So those descriptors are actually is going to save you a whole lot of time because it goes to the subject index, entities, and so forth. So that kind of gives you a good template to start with.
Yeah. So I think writing things down is that, first of all, I think a lot of people don't think about the audience when they write. I mean, I think it's just generally a communication challenge, is that being able to think about like what is the level of the audience that you're writing to, why would they want to read this document or read this particular data set that you are presenting. I think that just doing that put you in the top quartile, if not the top 10%. And then above and beyond that, I think it's just a challenge of having to write it down at all, because I think like that is oftentimes is not the core skills in a way of what many of us either study or have to perform schoolwork or tasks. So I think it's a kind of a whole new way of thinking about writing for the audience, explaining things, and there's a lot of different framework, on different storytelling and presentation. But I think at the end of the day, really, it's about why would someone want to read your stuff. And then last thing I would add is when we write, sometimes particularly for people who want to write and love to write, writing like product documents or user manual and like, commenting on your code and so on. I think the challenge becomes that like people almost want to write the perfect document, and it almost too much effort is spent in the document. But then the world is constantly changing. So again, you're constantly at this documentation of a 70% correct. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of times the team is so busy doing the work instead of documenting the work, which then again you end up having a perfectly documented system only a month later now is at 95%. And you wait a few months, it's 70%, which then again, the second it drops down to that kind of number, people stop referring to the documentation. They just go back and ping the person who they know, the expert, or who worked on the particular project or the system, because again, documentation is actually about trust, right? So it's much better to write something that is less and smaller in scope, but having the confidence that you can maintain it. And for developers, sometimes I actually tell them, be like, almost don't document your code, but document by the test, because a test, you're forced to exercise it every time when you deploy the code. So you're forced to check how real the documentation is. It's not a perfect system because certain things it just doesn't work on tests. But just to give an example of the challenge of keeping documents up to date. And I think a lot of time people spend more time thinking about the initial documentation and not the subsequent work that you require to maintain it.
Yeah, something that comes up for me there is with any publication, the concept of content pipelining. And we're talking about a few things here. The movement from your own personal process, and where it's effectively you are the audience, and there's a huge shared context that you have with yourself, even with the different personas, different sources of information, and then the moving out of person into some sort of relational or more social context, and finding ways to pipeline that, I think, within practices that fit within people's lifestyle and how they do the work, so that it's not this laborious process every time you need to update something, because exactly what you're saying, Alec, it's not going to work if you have to, ship this huge document every time. But if it could be, this weaving in of the content pipeline somehow. This is something I've thought a lot about, and creating some kind of cadence of doing that internally. I think there's a personal practice, and I also think that there's group practices that can emerge that can be designed as well.
Yeah, I see the first step towards that group practice is daily or weekly written check-ins. Because that's there you're saying what you did, which provides an opportunity for people to ask questions, but it also makes work visible, and through that we get out of our heads and develop a more social way of documenting.
So there is a question here from Chris about how much does AI help with the administrative load of knowledge management? How does Charmverse see the integration of AI agents for individuals and orgs?
Yeah, I mean, it's we certainly keep getting that questions about how we can incorporate AI agents. So currently there's not any integrated AI agent within Charmverse, although we actually do have some of our users through API, various AI agents to either summarize or query information that they put in Charmverse. So that's definitely a fast-moving area. And that's actually part of the reason why we haven't incorporated is that because I think the ecosystem is growing so fast and so many new things are happening, we almost are taking a wait and see approach to see like what are some of the top set of tools that will help that best work with Charmverse. But I think overall, AI agent is so good at summarization, in picking out key context and in pulling out particular items that are important within the documents or information that you're looking at. And I see tremendous opportunity in that sense of like how do you pull out concepts, how do you connect various concepts from the knowledge base that you already have.
Adding to that, like we viewed, or we are assuming that a lot of knowledge never makes it into any documents, kind of things that are discussed in Discord on discourse. So we've built we're still building an AI agent that you can then query, that you can query based on what is being discussed in a different communication platform. And of course, these answers could then be pulled into different tools.
Great. Then what do you think is the top priority for improving knowledge management right now? Start with Katarina this time.
Well, I think the top priority, but that is my answer for everything, is teaching people or humans how to document their processes or how to document their work. I think technology is always the easiest thing to solve, but getting humans to use the tools, that's the real bottleneck. But I don't think that's really the answer that you were expecting.
No, I mean, how would you do that? Or how are you doing that since you're working in this space? What do you tell people to do?
So right now, well, the AI agent, that's one solution, because as I said, the decisions or discussions done on platforms like Discord or Discourse that are feeding into, let's say, product development, but that are not documented. With the HiveMind, our AI bot, you can simply summarize it and then copy paste it into whatever knowledge management tool you use, or we integrate, for example, with Charmverse, and then we can just pull it into, it can be just pushed into Charmverse, and then the human being just has to kind of clean up the summary wherever it's needed. But that is something kind of for the future. What we have done with our team always is to pay attention when people are not doing the check-in and reminding them to actually do this, and to educate people that your work doesn't have to be perfect to share it, and through that building up habits.
Thank you, Katarina. Alex, I'm also aware you're leaving soon, so your answer to the same question or anything else you would like to share with us before you gotta go.
Yeah, let me that would be my last answer and final thoughts, I guess. Again, going back to that, the AI and the interaction between knowledge management and AI, I think being able to write for AI, making it easier for AI, could be really important skills in the coming few years. Before Charmverse, my last two startups is in the AI field, so I've been certainly spending a lot of time thinking about it, both in the past and currently. There's a reason why Facebook is very good at picking out face pictures, but then Google still have to drive around, Waymo still have to drive around, a car, and then we still don't have self-driving car yet. Fundamentally, to make AI work, you need a extremely large body of well-labeled data. At some point, yes, in words that we're crawling the internet like that, some of that data can be semi-structured or not structured at all, but the quality goes down when the structure goes down as well. So being able to create content in a way that's naturally easy for AI to understand and crawl and pull out the key concepts, I think that will sort of hasten the adoption and the usefulness of the knowledge management system that you're using. So yeah, play with different tools, check it out. Tagging. Anyhow, thank you for having me. It was super fun. Okay.
Thank you so much, Alex. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you very much for your time, Alex.
Yes, writing for AI. I had actually never thought of that. But yeah, makes sense. Here for AI to pick up your thoughts. Quite structured. All right. So what about the biggest challenges? What do you think we should be working on next? Rena, and I guess anybody who has an opinion, also welcome to share. What are the biggest challenges?
I would actually like to hear it from the audience, because I think everybody is working with different types of settings. So I'm keen to hear what other people are thinking are the biggest challenges. One thing I'm foreseeing is more and more international teams. So we are entering the area of cross-cultural communication. Not everybody is a native English speaker. People are using words differently. At the same time, there's more and more async communication, and I mean, this is the whole point of knowledge management. So then how can the knowledge that is documented, as Alex mentioned before, in order for it to be useful, it needs to be accurate, and for that we're talking back again, or we are back at the point about how can we get people to talk or to document the things properly. So that's what I see is a biggest challenge. And then of course around the AI and technology things. Jennifer, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, so I'm getting back into a couple of different DAOs, and what I'm running into is that it seems like the wikis aren't necessarily up to date. Like there's wikis I work, I'm familiar with them. I know how to navigate them. I worked on them. I helped build some of them, but it seems like the information on the wikis hasn't been updated, but things have really changed a lot in the DAOs. Mostly they've kind of like subbed off into other DAOs, but that's not really easy to track. And then I know that there's more. I know that they're active. I know people are still having meetings and building things and doing things, but the places that I went to before for that information, the discourse and the Discord don't seem particularly active. But then like new Discords have been made with kind of like spin-offs and sub-DAOs. So I guess it's like tracking information, like the information that was developed and documented a couple of years ago is still good information, but it's not connected to the current information in a readily discernible way. Like I feel like, especially since so much is async and so much of what we're doing in Web3, I mean, I know some people are in it whole hog and that's all they do, but people who are like more into governance and identity, a lot of times you have to have like a 3D job in order to maintain your life to be able to work in that space. And sometimes we're in and out, and we need to be able to find out what's going on right now with the resources that we're accustomed to using that we've already developed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like for me, it makes sense because people are spending an initial effort in documenting how, let's say, governance works, or what the decision-making process is, or how their onboarding is structured. And over time, we improve these processes, or we develop bad habits, and then suddenly it's done differently. But it's not the page, which should be the single source of truth, is not updated. So it's kind of everything gets old and stale. Question then is, why is it not updated? The second point that you raised, it sounded for me like the last mile problem in logistics. Like you have information, but you want more, and then you don't know where to find the more, or you don't know who to contact for that.
Right. Well, I've made it to a meeting for a DAO I was in before, and they were talking about like their financials and stuff, and one of the guys was like, I don't even know how many wallets we have right now. We got to tighten this up, where things just get spread out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Rada Mercure, nice to see you here.
Likewise. I kind of wanted to plus one what Jennifer had said and kind of highlight sort of the reality that a lot of knowledge workers in the space live in that that type of administrative work isn't compensated as regularly or well as a lot of other DAO work. And that creates huge time constraints in a enormously time consuming job, right? You know, knowledge workers have a ton of work to do always. And as a steward in a knowledge stewardship work stream or two, I know I'm always strapped for time, always have stuff to do, and the pay isn't very good. And on top of like pay to you know afford more time, a lot of the resources that are needed are tools to save time as well. And like those resources aren't quite there yet. There's awesome tools like Charmverse. There's a few others in the works, hopefully, but I think the underlying issue is the material conditions of the people who are managing that knowledge, and sometimes those conditions are not sufficient for good knowledge management.
Yeah, it sounds similar that the problem teachers have, or nurses, or anybody who has to document stuff for their work. It's stuff that I have to do, that they have to do, but it's not really work related. But if they don't do it, every hell breaks loose. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not the doing documentation isn't the sexy part, and I'm the one doing it for TogetherCrew, so I'm fully agree with you there. Yatan?
Yeah, I would say, well, I'm just going through the whole build a second brain thing with the Tago for this more personal knowledge management, but the key term there is discoverability. And that's, yeah, that would be like the biggest challenge for me is you write something, and I've done it in several communities I'm part of, and we write up all these documents, and it's just nobody ever knows that they exist. They're not integrated. So you write them, and then suddenly you see another one popping up, and then it's like, no, I already wrote it. You know, so, but in the meantime, it's as if it never existed in the worst case scenario, and yeah, I find that very challenging because that means we literally reinventing the wheel very often, or just not applying what you have. And a way is to go through it is to review it and try to minimize it as much as possible. Maybe that's something that I look at things and see, what can I actually delete from this? Or what can I highlight? Or what can I summarize so it becomes less and less and less and less big? So it's not a 20-page document that you need to read, which you're probably not going to read. You're a newbie.
Yeah. So you mentioned as a challenge that you write documents, but then people don't know that they existed, so they're doing their own one, and then that even if they know that they existed, they might be not reading it simply because it's just too big.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's the annoying part. You spend time making something easy for other people to understand, and then you have to do a lot of lobbying and dropping your links constantly for them to read them, and then after 3 months finally people realize that you have actually written down everything, and if they would just include your documents in the onboarding process, life would be easier for everybody. Michael?
Yeah, thanks. So I feel really strongly that knowledge management is a domain that really needs to have its own delegated that role within an organization. Ideally, I think that we've been talking about, well, these are skills that everyone should have, and we need to find a way that everyone sort of is doing it the same way. But I think it has far bigger potential implications if there is like very clear process structure, mapping work done at the beginning. Now, I'll just pause right here and acknowledge that I think Jennifer nailed it. There's a challenge there. One of them is that, I mean, I felt this too, is that there's the Web3 spaces that I've played in so far and worked in, there's already this sort of implicit way of working that I see. I just don't see a lot of examples of this working well, of this being prioritized. What I mean by this, I name it the forces of centralization that help this messy coherence stay coherent, right? Stay in one thing that ultimately, okay, there's a lot of flexibility for how work is getting done, but it can't just be chaotic and random or it flies apart. I'm going to say one other thing, and it's actually, I didn't make this up. This comes from Michael Polanyi, who was a British polymath who did a lot of work writing and thinking about human knowledge and human systems. So maybe some of you heard this before. So we always know more than we can say, and we always say more than we can write down. That's just a fact of being an embodied being, right? There's knowledge that we will never be able to communicate. We can't. It's in there. We do our best with our words, and then a more feeble attempt if we actually write things down. And whenever we're thinking about text, written language as the medium for knowledge, data, information transfer, we have to keep in mind we're already missing out on a tremendous amount of potential knowledge, data, information, knowledge transfer. There are ways around that. There are ways to work with that, but it goes beyond thinking about what is the technology that we're doing to document the stuff that we do. I'll leave it there. Yeah, there's a lot more to say, but I won't get into things that I've practiced yet.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Thank you. I agree with everything that has been said so far. The one thing that I think could be added to this, and I've noticed within the environment that I'm currently involved with, is that there are tremendously talented people within these communities, and nobody knows the skills they have. I've been reaching out to individuals to ask them about their backgrounds, to learn more about them, what their education has become. And because you have a getting started page, which is basically text, you don't have an actual introduction process. You don't have a human resources set up. So a lot of talent can be tied up in just trying to get introduced into the system. And then even once they're in the system, their abilities aren't recognized unless they brought them up themselves. And it could be said, yes, that we have a responsibility to speak for ourselves. But if we know that other people, and if you're working in the knowledge industry, period, if you gain knowledge from other people and you could share what they know so that other people know those resources are there, then they're not just sitting on a shelf waiting to be picked up. Somebody can actually go looking for them and find them. That's just one thing of many, but I agree with everything that's being said here. It's very rich.
Thank you, Billy. Chris?
Chris?
Hey, everybody. I'm trying to sort of summarize and sort of synthesize everything that I'm hearing. I find it fascinating. It sounds to me we're struggling as it is to convey knowledge in a anywhere near perfectly between people, times, places, etc. But there is a layer of meta knowledge that we're trying to give that knowledge so that we can tag it or catalog it or give it some degree of permanence or some greater time than it spends in front of us on our waterfall or chat or in Discord, just so that it gets archived somewhere to give it a little bit more permanence. And it feels that work of contextualizing knowledge is who said it and who were they and when was it said, as in which people were around and how did it contrive and where was it said? Was it said in the original version of our DAO or was it said in the second version? Like what Jennifer said, she's come back to the same DAO and it's a totally different place. So all of that is context that you wouldn't know to record because you don't know the future of what's going to happen, which is you're going to become part of a little bit of an archive of this conversation, which is sort of irrelevant when we come back to it. It's an interesting diversion, but there's a nugget of what you said or something that was said in that meeting, which retains its relevance somehow. You don't know, you've no idea ahead of time which bit that is. And it just feels there's a bit of interoperability between the context of knowledge that we're missing. That in a very simple way, when I tag something, this is what Katrina was saying, is if I tag something, somebody doesn't tag it in the same way. And so even if we manage to capture the knowledge, even if we manage to capture the meta knowledge, the context of what it is, trying to make that context be relevant at a different time, in a different place, to somebody else, in this maybe, and to retain some degree of authenticity as to how it was said in the first place, is extreme. Is like another layer of difficulty. So it's not just that we can't capture the knowledge. It's not just that we can't capture the context of the knowledge, but we can't interoperate between those different forms of capture. And that's going to leave us to think about. I think I can't answer that at the moment, but that's really interesting.
Thanks for that summary, Katerina. Yeah, Ben.
So I love what you guys are saying, and it's so good to connect with other DAOs. I see you're struggling with the same stuff. I'm a part of Seeds, Regenerative Cryptocurrency, and the Collaboratory DAO. What's left of it? 3 of us right now, created by Haifa. I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of that, but there's 2 things I want to bring to the table here. One, I haven't heard a lot of energy around, and that is, so operability would touch on it, but it's the engagement factor that, there's one thing that I've seen with communication and coordination. There seems to be these urgent willingness to help, and the inability to find where to be or where a live channel to go and then coordinate. And that seems to be the engagement factor can be ramped up somehow. I think AI is going to be one of the best ways to coordinate information, but also interest and engagement. And that, because a lot of us are working for free. We're working from our hearts, and there's a lot of energy there yet to be untapped. And along with that coordination will be the valuation, the impact metric from, if AI could measure the ability to coordinate that a person's putting in, that would be a phenomenal way to unbiasedly synthesize and steer based on predetermined weights measures toward the goals. Yeah, so the engagement factor, I think there's a lot of energy lost, just completely sunk into the oblivion of these digital spaces. And it's sad to see years and years and years, 4 or 5 years go by, but it also really roots down what that need is. And so I just wanted to just drop that in here, is there's so much life to be engaged with, so much passion on so many different levels, where a great phone app coordinated by AI could really see where one person could connect with another and put emphasis on the talents, the skill sets. And so I hope to see that soon. And I want to thank you guys for the invite here. It's great listening to the information, knowledge, and the shared desires here. So see you guys, or I'll be listening in.
Should I take it?
Yeah, Alex,
yes.
go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to keep adding considerations to the mix. Maybe trying to focus a little bit in the incentives, because I think one of the great opportunities of blockchain technology is the design of incentive systems. I think in the context of an organization in general, obviously a DAO, like having the agreements, like the written agreements updated, and this can be either policies, descriptions of roles, but also operating manuals for specific teams or roles, is extremely useful. And I think one of the biggest problems is actually the lack of incentives to do so. Even if you get the technical functionalities in place, part of the issue, I think, is that in most of the organizations, the tracking of how people is contributing is individual. And in most cases, your results are not tied to pausing and going back and updating a manual that you just used, but you notice is not updated. So in a lot of ways, it's almost like the more individualistic the KPIs and the tracking of development, the less incentives a person has to actually stop to do care work for the system. And if you're thinking onboarding and governance as a practice of caring for the system, because maybe it's not going to help me, but it's going to help the next person who will find this rock in the middle. Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is how do we do incentives in a collective way so people understand that making a pause and updating the agreement is actually the best for them and for the system in general. And how can we make it fun to update manuals and documents so everything is up to the date. Yeah, check.
Yeah, I think that's a very cool way of saying it, because it always sounds like overhead, like why do I have to like update or read this or update it or make it shorter, like, which is like generally I think an issue with even company culture. There was a research that was like said there's an inverse relationship between having your values on the wall and like living them in your company, because people are kind of like, it's on the wall, but I don't really need to deal with it anymore. Maybe it's a little bit something like that, but with certain manuals as well. It's more like, so I don't actually have to. It generates more of an avoidance than an engagement behavior. Yeah, and caring for the system that takes care of the whole thing, or of the process. I think it's a nice way. But we have a last couple of minutes, and question: where is this all going? What does the future of knowledge management actually look like?
The future of knowledge management. We'll all have a chip inside our brain and nobody has to document ever again. Well, that's kind of our future thing. I don't know how many of you want to be chipped and to what degree this is realistic. I think what we're going to see is more and more things being documented automatically by AI, and the problem of how to get humans to use the documentation still not being addressed.
Kind of like all these bots that live in the meeting. I have a bot, but I rarely ever actually read all the transcripts and stuff. Rather make a summary of my own. Or what is this called? The Netflix series where you're recording everything in your camera. You can replay it. It's actually a form of surveillance rather than a useful thing for your company or your life. Like Mirror. Anybody else? What do you think? Oh, the future. How does it look? Artem.
I just want to say that I think a very useful metaphor is information radiators and refrigerators. Like if you put something on a wall, people don't have to remember about it. Like it's always radiating the important information in the office or somewhere. So I'm wondering, like, what are the information radiators for is that chatbots that like radiate something on Discord, or is it something else?
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. What do you think? Is it chatbot?
I guess it's something that people look at when they open their Notion or something else. I don't know, like basically it has to be something that they look at without making any effort. I don't know what that can be. That's why walls and whiteboards are so powerful. It's hard to emulate them in the digital world.
We have come to our end of our time slot. Thank you, Artem. Thank you, Alex and Alex, who already left, and Katerina and Bisir and Billy and everybody who contributed.